Warren Buffett is selling bank stocks. He just said this yesterday at their annual meeting. I want to talk about that. I'll talk about his thoughts on the banking system. Obviously, he's very pro-America. He's been pro-banking in the past as well. So let's hit on that. Also talk about some of the big news that's happening in the market today. Some news on some big exchanges. So we have a lot to cover. I'm going to try to cover it in a short period of time. If you don't mind, hit subscribe underneath the video. Turn on that bell notification so you know right when I post future videos. You can also hit the like if you want to support the channel. There's also a link down there in case you want a ticket to Bitcoin Miami. You can get 10% off using the code MFF. Also a link down there to NordVPN to protect yourself on the internet. I highly suggest that. Also a link down there to BitGet in case you want to trade something like 𝗡𝗍𝗍 on leverage. So you can see Bitcoin still around 29,000. Now we have some big events happening this week. As I said in yesterday's video, we won't go over this really too much, but CPI, we have PPI coming out. It's going to be a big week for the market. Hopefully we see this drop into the fours, even maybe the mid fours. That'd be crazy. The forecast is 5%, but there are some possibilities for some big moves this week. Now, we just got news from Binance that they've temporarily closed BTC withdrawals as the Bitcoin network is experiencing a congestion issue. Our team is currently working to fix. This will probably just blow over in an hour. They'll probably say, hey, BTC withdrawals are back up and going again. But just a reminder that centralized exchanges can do things like this. So if you have a lot of crypto on a centralized exchange, I highly suggest getting it off and putting it on something like a Trezor or a Ledger. I have links to Trezor underneath the video. If you don't use it, though, that's fine. Just make sure that you're comfortable because exchanges are great for exchanging. They're not great for holding. Now, speaking of exchanges, Voyager plans to liquidate assets. They basically were turned down by Binance for regulatory issues. Binance said that they didn't want to try to take over Voyager anymore. And creditors will recover an estimated 36% of their assets, a far smaller slice of the pie than they would have received if the platform sale to FTX or Binance US went through. It's kind of amazing that they had this little of their crypto left. Right after all their losses from some of those big hedge funds that they lent to about a year ago. It's crazy that they only have 36% of assets, but hopefully those assets move out pretty quickly and they don't keep on spending money on lawyers and that kind of thing. 𝗡𝗍𝗍𝗩𝗡 said just a few days ago, 722 banks. That's a quote from Federal Reserve. This is from one of their reports. At the third quarter end, 722 banks reported unrealized losses exceeding 50% of capital. We talked about this yesterday, but that's an insane amount. 31% of the banks report negative tangible equity values. The banking system is in trouble. The U.S. is now talking about banning short selling because of bank crisis. Now, this is a little bit of a disclaimer that this isn't necessarily true how they phrase this, right? They're not talking about banning all short selling, but they are talking about banning short selling on some regional banks that are in trouble, which is interesting, right? The U.S. government trying to save the day by banning short selling instead of backing deposits or lowering interest rates or something like that. They're just going to ban short selling. I don't think that's necessarily going to help as much as they think, but I think it could stem some of the bleeding or stop some of the bleeding. Now, Warren Buffett has said in the past, banking is very good business if you don't do anything dumb. He's held banks for decades. He's gotten really good deals on some banks like Bank of America where they give them special coupons or special interest and give them really good deals on the shares. Now, he just said yesterday that they have sold some banks in the past 6 months. This is the actual clip. Now, I'll play the clip, but I want to say this is, I think, pretty interesting. Obviously, Warren Buffett's very pro-America, basically saying, hey, if you think America is going to be around, you should invest in American stocks. The American economy is the best in the world, but yet he doesn't trust all banks. And it makes sense, right? They invest in very non-risky businesses, and banks leverage 20-1 sometimes. So they are kind of against that. And I'll play the clip for you, but I just found it really interesting to watch this yesterday.
And we sold bank stocks in the last, we sold them first when the pandemic broke out, and then we sold some more in the last 6 months. And we don't know where the shareholders of the big banks necessarily, or the regional banks or any are heading. I've got my bank, I've got my own personal money, and I'm probably above the FDIC limit, and I've got it with a local bank, and I don't worry about it in the least. But in terms of owning banks, events will determine their future, and you've got politicians involved. You've got a whole lot of people don't really understand how the system works, and I would say that you've had something less than a perfect communication between various people and the American public. So the American public is probably as confused about banking as ever, and that has consequences. And nobody knows what the consequences are because every event starts recreating a different dynamic. I mean, in physics, you know that pi is going to be 3.14, infinite number of numbers after that. But no matter what happens, but you don't know what has happened to the stickiness of deposits at all. It got changed by 2008. It's gotten changed by this. I mean, and that changes everything. And so we're very cautious in a situation like that about ownership of banks, and we do remain with one bank holding a deal, but we originated that deal, and with the Bank of America, and I like Bank of America. I like the management, and I proposed the deal to them, so I stick with it.
So he says there that they own one banking stock. Obviously, that's Bank of America. They got a great deal during the last major recession, but it sounds like basically if they hadn't gotten that deal, he wouldn't be invested in that bank, right? If they only hold one bank stock because they had a great deal, they'd probably sell out if they didn't have that great deal, which I think is going to send maybe a bit of a tailspin through the banking sector this week, because Warren Buffett is someone, again, that's usually very pro-America. And the fact is, the banking system is really what America's built on financially. Big banks helping out people get lines of credit, and you can trust the banks. They're basically the government is the thought process. But obviously recently, the government has not been willing to back them up, at least for shareholders. There's been bank runs. So this is something that I just wanted to play for you because it is new. It is showing that even some of the big classic dividend investors that look for value aren't necessarily finding value in the banking sector. They think it's much too risky. I wanted to show that to you. So what is the solution? Well, maybe it's Bitcoin. Maybe it's Bitcoin so you can hold your own money. Obviously, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger don't believe in that. But it does give you a hedge so that you can actually hold some of your own wealth and not rely on other people to not get greedy with it. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.